Welcome to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, and on podcast on all major platforms. We're broadcasting from the treaty lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. I'm Paul Smith, host of Food Farm Talk. Please follow our podcast and social media accounts. Today, you'll hear a discussion of the business case for climate solutions in agriculture that was held at the 2023 Arrell Food Summit. It had the theme of Pathways to Change and took place on November 14th, 2023 in Toronto and was organized, obviously, by the Arrell Food Institute here at the University of Guelph. And thanks to the organizers for permission to air this recording.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mauricio, Alanis, Director of Sustainability Strategy and Partnerships at Maple Leaf Foods. And it is my pleasure to welcome our panel today on the business case for climate solutions. I'll let the panel introduce themselves. Please share with us who you are and what you and your organization does.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mauricio. My name is Mohamed Yaghi. I am the Agriculture and Climate Policy Lead. I sit on the Economics and Thought Leadership Team and the Climate Action Institute. And in case you're wondering what the Climate Action Institute does, is we get down into the action and thick of it. So apart from gathering public policy experts and economists from around Canada to find the best solutions towards a more net zero Canada, we also are on the ground with initiatives like the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agri-Food. It's an alliance with Maple Leaf Foods, Nutrien down there, Loblaws, and the Boston Consulting Group, with, of course, support from the Arrell Food Institute as well, with a goal of reducing emissions by 50 megatons by 2030 and 150 megatons by 2050. So apart from research, we're also on the ground trying to make a difference. So that's what we do, apart from financing everyone in this room as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohamed.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie. You probably can tell from the accent, I'm based in the UK. I work for a company called SLR Consulting. We're a global consultancy with the tagline of making sustainability happen. And that's my passion. My background, I'm an engineer, but my passion is helping companies with climate change, to decarbonize, to facilitate the energy transition. And I've been privileged over the last few years to chair in the UK a cross-working industry and government regulator working group to help develop and evolve climate policy, which has been amazing, insightful, frustrating, rewarding, all of the above. And I loved the session on policy development today. So I am very, very passionate about helping companies, organizations, particularly in the food and beverage industry where I've worked the most, very passionate about helping make a tangible difference and to try and help get us on the road to decarbonize.
Hi, my name is Ellery, Burton. I'd like to start with the fact that I grew up on a farm in Manitoba. My grandfather's 89 years old. He's still farming, and he doesn't know how to work the internet, so I'll have to get him to watch this on YouTube later. But yeah, my passion is agriculture. My grandfather wouldn't let me take over the farm. He said, you got to go to school. So I got my degree in mechanical engineering at the Royal Military College, spent 10 years in the service, domestically and abroad. And then for family reasons, got out, passionate about product development. I spent a few years in the manufacturing industry, and the last, I guess, 5 to 7 years in food production at High Life Foods and a large equipment supplier in Western Canada, and really found my passion for bringing farming practices and knowledge together with technology to solve some of our biggest challenges out there. So I founded a company called Alterra Innovation, which we have basically developed patented products for much of what Peter was talking about, solving the real problems on the farm and bringing additional precision, tools, and of course profits to farmers, to members of the food value chain. And realized mechanical engineering is part of the picture, but started realizing that more and more it's about technology. So I'm back in school taking a PhD in biosystems engineering at the University of Manitoba, focused on machine vision and machine learning also in livestock production, but my research will be in smart vertical farming indoors. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you very much to the Arrell family for putting this on.
Excellent.
Sally Flis, I'm the Director of Sustainable Ag Program Design and Outcome Management at Nutrien Ag Solutions, because we like to put lots of words in all of our titles. Nutrien Ag Solutions is the retail side of Nutrien, and Nutrien Ag Solutions is the largest ag retailer in the world, so we sell everything a grower is going to need, from seed through crop production, and in some places actually market, in Australia, for example, we actually market livestock and handle crop distribution and that sort of thing after harvest. I work on designing our sustainable ag programs that we're going to take to growers in the field to sign up for, to drive practice change and emission reduction, potentially soil organic carbon sequestration through practices on the farm. And then after the growers have signed up and we've collected data, I work with our downstream partners like Maple Leaf and RBC on what are the outcomes and desired reporting that's needed. What is the reporting that we're going to put in our own ESG report to meet our goals of, at this point, 75 million acres of sustainable ag incorporated into our programs at a global scale by 2030.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, guys. So we're going to be talking about the business case for climate solutions, and I want to get started with Ellery. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that exist in developing business cases. So on one hand, we know that taking climate action for the future seems obvious, but we also know that in many cases that's not always the case. There's skepticism, there's challenges, there's roadblocks. What do you feel stands in the way of there being a business case for climate solutions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think probably there's folks in this room and others that are really focused on doing things for the climate for good reasons. And there's, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe, if I could say, more profit-based solutions. And I think we have to spend more time listening to each other and understanding that at our table we were chatting about common ground. And in a business case, as an engineer, Julie's mechanical as well, we were talking about it last night, like lean manufacturing. So, you know, climate emissions, it's waste, right? And so how do we do things more efficiently? How do we, it could be reducing carbon emissions, but just waste in general. So you can accomplish multiple goals. You can help the climate and help a business by eliminating waste, doing things more efficiently. And I think that's, instead of, you know, maybe it's a terminology shift. If you're in one of these businesses, I think if you start speaking their language, you can accomplish both, where you're having positive impacts on the climate, but you're also driving profitability in your business, you know, and potentially all along the value chain, there's opportunities to improve and to benefit, you know, multiple stakeholders beyond just climate change and the business units themselves. So I think that's what I often do, is just break it down into very practical terms. Saving energy is saving money, saving the climate at the same time. So,
yeah, I love that. Sally, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we sit pretty firmly right in the middle of that spectrum you mentioned, Ellery, we have a really strong drive on that. How is this going to be a profitable situation, not just for us, but for our growers in the field? Because if the growers aren't profitable, we're not profitable, right? So how do we find that balance? And as we deploy things into the field, it's balancing it is exactly balancing that. How do we make the grower more profitable with the practices that we're recommending in the field? And how do we drive our business at the same time? But it's the discussion of the traditional drive of business versus the more leadership drive of the business space that we're in with sustainable ag versus a lot of our other products and services in the field. So how do we help demonstrate that growers that we're helping and working with are on the cutting edge, are doing the sustainable practices, are willing to implement more, so that as downstream and consumers want to see those impacts on the ground, they know to look to growers that work with somebody who does business with someone like Nutrien Ag Solutions. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've heard from everybody in the space that we can't be trusted because we just sell inputs to growers, and all we want to do is see how much we can sell. And we have a program in both the US and Canada where we're asking growers to use less fertilizer and change placement and timing. and source of fertilizer that they're using so that they can be producing the types of products that downstreams like Maple Leaf want to see and be able to talk about and market, but we're also improving the efficiency of production on every acre that that grower has.
Awesome. Mohamed, what do you think?
I think a lot. There is an incredible survey that was recently conducted by Statistics Canada. They asked every sector of the economy a few key questions about their environmental practices. And what was really stunning were the results. And what we saw was when you look at agriculture, it's, as a business practice, farmers perform carbon sequestration 3 times more than the next biggest part of the economy that does that. When it comes to green processes in an operation, agriculture, again, is leading that way. When you look at reduction in energy and water usage, again, agriculture leads that way. The real question we need to answer is, how can we effectively, as a business case, remunerate producers for what they're already doing on the farm right now? And when you look at and compare Canada to different countries, even the OECD, top food exporters, Canada, again, in terms of GHG or emissions per hectare, we're ranked second behind Australia when it comes to that rank. And of course, that's not the whole entire story. There's a lot of collective metrics that we have to consider as well. But effectively, how can we take this opportunity and reward financially the producers that are already doing this on the ground every day? And of course, I can talk about government and regulations and talk about, maybe there's a need for less risk management because sometimes that's the risk itself, I guess, in an odd way. But also, I need to call out, as someone from RBC, the private sector, we've seen a lot of discussion about agriculture in the past year, but the private sector needs to step up and provide those market incentives to help producers get over the short-term risk that we're seeing right now to adopt more climate-smart agricultural practices in order to shore up that risk. And because essentially, in the long run, these practices that we see implemented across the country are going to be much more profitable, and it's going to increase the value and yields for our farmers.
Awesome. Julie, what are you seeing across the pond?
After 25 years of helping develop policies and implement them, I'm going to build on what Mohamed has just said in terms of the business case. So for me, what stands in the way of the business case is short-termism. And a lot of these solutions, like you were just saying, they need a lot more time and a lot more investment than what we're used to. So companies wanting to work with 2 or 3 year paybacks, we're not going to make the difference unless we're going for the 4, 5, 6, 7 year paybacks. So things like electrification. So in the manufacturing sector, a really big step change is going to be if we can stop using the fossil fuels and electrify those processes. But that's a massive cost investment and a very big payback. So that's where we need help. So for me, the first thing is short-termism. And the second one is, if this was easy, we'd all be doing it. It's hard. And one of the hardest things I think is represented by this room is that we need to collaborate across multiple parts of the supply chain. That's hard. It's nice to do because it's nice to be in a room like this and we're all talking about the same purpose, but it's a very hard thing to do. It takes lots and lots of stakeholders, producers, distributors, users, equipment manufacturers, regulators, policymakers, and that's where we have to come together like today to be able to find the solutions which can aid our business cases and, like they were saying, aid profitability and make the business case more compelling.
Awesome. So I'm hearing lots of common ground thinking, collaboration, listening, being practical, thinking in multiple benefits frameworks, really listening to the collective VOCs or the voice of the customers, if you will, ensuring proper remuneration, patient investments, and longer-term thinking. Lots of really good answers there. Let's shift gears and talk about some of the enablers to make some of these business cases happen. Let's play a magic policy wand game. So if you were a policy fairy and had a magic wand, what one change to current policy or one new policy would you make and why? Tell us about what level of policy making, whether it's provincial, corporate, municipal, federal, UN. would you focus on and why? Let's take it with our policy guru first, Mohamed.
Policy guru. I wish. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do two. But maybe from the onset, again, it's about focusing on what's going to make a business case for producers. Because it's a frustration of mine. I work with a lot of economists. I work with a lot of experts in other sectors. And they talk about these new fancy solutions that are in development that are going to need 5 years to come to fruition. We already have a shovel-ready solution with agriculture. First off, I think the communication around the role that producers can play in Canada needs to be stepped up, because it is really one of the few sectors of the economy that can naturally sequester carbon from other parts of the economy. So number one is what we're doing at Kansas at the moment. And I don't mean to put an RBC plug, I do apologize, but it is really important. It's this, how do we approach this measurement, reporting, verification framework when it comes to remunerating farmers for the carbon they sequester? At the moment, we don't really have one on a national basis that considers a hybrid model of a lot of different measurement, reporting, verification models. I'm going to, for shorthand, call it an MRV. But if we're able to unlock that and unlock this measurement standard, that's going to initiate a lot of economic activity. And again, I'm going to go back to this survey that I referenced at the beginning. One of the biggest barriers, and it is the biggest barrier out of any sector of the economy when it comes to adopting more environmental practices, is that many producers across the country find the metrics they use right now to measure sustainability too confusing. How can we create something that is standardized, that is simple, that is affordable, and can be implemented right now? Because again, we have a shovel-ready solution that can be adopted right away. So if we can crack this measurement, the standardization of measurement, especially carbon sequestration, even methane, that is going to be a game changer for the country, in my personal belief. I'm going to cheat. Number two, it's more of a Mohamed, hope, I guess. But we had worked with the Arrell Food Institute on 9 policies in a recent report called A New Ag Deal. You should read it. It's great. But one of the really amazing things that I learned was that we used to have a thriving extension service offering across many provinces, and of course, maybe some of the approach to it might be outdated at the moment, but the substitution that's in right now isn't really effective. You can hear from Alberta, for instance, they've reduced their extension service centers. They've actually closed them. There's a hotline, so there's a little tradition I do whenever I go to Calgary. I call the hotline and hope for an answer. I never get one. So that really tells you the state of extension services in Canada. But we need to have an innovative approach to it, similar to the US, because you can see universities like the University of Idaho, for instance, to have many extension services across the state helping farmers, giving them direct knowledge and a moment's notice. And that's what we really need, access to easy knowledge as well. So sorry for cheating, but yes.
That's good. Let's go down the panel. Julie?
Okay, so my pen is the magic wand. So channeling, what do I want this pen to do, my magic wand? I'm here to help learn lessons. So one of the biggest lessons that I've been through over the last few years is with policymakers is to plead with them to create a stable policy environment with long-term policies that they are committed to that are not going to change with a change of administration. Because all of that creates a lack of confidence in us being able to implement that business case that we're trying to come up with. So for me, a significant step forward would be for policymakers to give us that environment that says, this is the policy, this is the funding, this is what we're committing to, because that's going to strengthen our business case. It's going to give us more confidence to go to investors to ask for money to be able to implement the solutions. So predictable policies, predictable environment, I think will make the biggest difference. So my magic wand to all the policymakers in the world, it's I cast a little spell on you to ask for that.
Ellery?
I'm going to follow Mohamed's lead and do 2 as well. One of which is, we're in Hogtown, so originally I debated talking about livestock, but it's Hogtown, right? Toronto? So we could talk about pigs. So interestingly enough, Mauricio and I got to know each other on a project related to livestock waste. So livestock's become very industrialized, as many of you know. And one of the challenges I see there is actually the livestock industry spread out across, multiple municipalities. In Manitoba, there'll be municipalities that don't want livestock production, so it starts to condense in some areas, but generally speaking, it's very spread out. The challenge with that is you've got these waste streams that are also spread out but also dense enough that they get into waterways. So it's kind of this really, I guess, a perfect storm in some ways, but just a really bad way of doing things. So my policy wish there would be having cooperation amongst municipal and national levels of government to actually think about pig production where you increase the density. So instead of having 10,000 animals, finishing animals would be a typical finishing barn, you might have 100,000 on that site. Reason being is then you have a sufficient enough volume of waste to have a biogas, anaerobic digestion biogas facility that not only can convert that waste, but can do it profitably. So they're doing this in France already. It's not a new thing. But in order to have increased livestock densities today, you would have to convince municipal citizens that that's a good idea. And for the most part, they wouldn't want to deal with it. But I think if we are going into this industrial agriculture, and we need to, unfortunately, just because of population growth, we also have to think about things differently. And that would be one thing that I think would make our industry, if I could say it that way, we're very much in livestock country. It would make it much more sustainable to the point where we can produce renewable natural gas for the power cities, which they're doing in Lamballe, France. This company's name is Couperle. If you're interested in learning more about it, they power half the city of Lamballe. I think it's 50,000 residents. Julie's nodding along, and that's from their pig barns. The other thing I just wanted to add a second one because of what Mohamed said. Soil sequestration. I hope there's 300 innovators on the listening online. We need to figure out how to measure the soil organic matter, organic carbon sequestration levels. It's a huge problem, and if we can figure out, I don't know if it's governments or policies that can help with that, but if we can figure out a way to actually measure that, not taking samples to a lab, but measuring 10 million acres of farmland across Western Canada and the world potentially in a kind of a high speed. I'm sure that would help Nutrien with fertilizer applications. The sky's the limit if we can figure out what needs to be put into the soil to grow an efficient crop next year, as opposed to kind of, it's getting more precise, but kind of a broad application of fertilizers. So.
Excellent. Sally?
Well, just to follow on Ellery's comment a little bit first is not really a policy thing, but listening to the speakers earlier today, how do we use that level of technology and definition to figure out where is the right spot to grow what crop? So much of what we grow, where we grow it, is because we've always grown it there. Mm-hmm. And with the changes in precipitation and temperature, that may not be the right thing to grow there anymore. So how do we use all these technologies to figure out what is the right place to grow, what is the right crop to grow in the right place as these changes happen, and have those innovations available? I don't know if mine are really policies. They are definitely lacks that I have come across as we have gone through this journey of signing up a grower in a carbon program and getting all the way to a verified credit with a carbon registry. One is the baseline. Nobody in the world that I can think of has a good baseline for what is the potential for emission reduction or soil organic carbon sequestration. There's lots of estimates out there. And as we work directly with growers and collect that field level data, those estimates are not up to date, and they are not based on what's happening in the field today and what 2023 conventional agriculture is versus what 2011, 2009 even, when you look at some of the US data, is conventional ag was. And so we are not accurately measuring or finding the places where we can have the biggest impact, because the base data that we have available from governments is so far out of date that we can't figure out where is the next best place to spend the dollars that are available from the government or downstream or banks. And then the second would be because everybody else other than Julie did too. I'm going to do too as well. The second isn't so much a policy thing as working with companies like Maple Leaf. How do we be as truthful and tagged together in the claims up and down the supply chain as we can, right? So we want to be on a report. How do we line up better the need for reporting and putting out their products that are from what we've done in the field with the verification cycle, with the time it takes to collect that data from a grower? We're just finishing up 2023. We won't have verified claims until hopefully June next year. Everybody wants to report and everybody wants to put their ESG reports out and make statements between now and the end of Q1. The system does not function in a way at this point in time between grower data collection, verification and validation, and working with registries in a way that that is ever going to happen for crops produced in the US or in Canada, because it doesn't come together that quickly. And with that, how do we then think about the allocation of those sustainable crops to different downstreams? Because what happened right now, we have a great relationship with Maple Leaf. We're really working on how much of their feed are we impacting with the practices we're implementing in Canada. But when we look at everybody that produces food in North America that wants to have a claim or talk about sustainable sourcing, we do not have the infrastructure in grain distribution and data collection to allow that to happen at this point in time. I don't know how we change that. That's a big ship to turn, but that is going to be a huge challenge as more and more companies want to make claims for 2030 on sustainably sourced products and haven't invested as early as some of our partners had in finding what's happening in their supply shed. And the timing it doesn't come together with the way commodity markets work and the way environmental reporting and regulations want to work.
Yeah, these are all great enablers. What I'm hearing here all resonates very much with what I think we live and breathe every day in our collective industries. It really starts with data, is what I'm hearing, a good baseline, and then a good ability to, in a consistent and standardized way, be able to measure, monitor, report, and verify. Those are really the enablers for us to be able to transact across supply chains and be able to make those business cases come alive. Predictability as well is what I've heard. Some of the things that I heard from you, Julie, ensuring that we have a predictable policy and environment. I think that's also very, very important, which sort of dates back to what you were saying of longer term thinking. And then, again, this notion of collaboration between municipal and federal governments as well. All great answers. Let's move on and talk about some of the reasons why we've done this. So all of your organizations are in some way a climate leader, and I'm sure you're doing this for both business reasons as well as high-level aspirational and climate impact reasons. What were the arguments that swayed the hearts and minds in your own organizations? What were some of the catalysts for trying to wrestle with these problems? Let's start with Sally first this time.
I'm going to be totally honest, and I don't think we've swayed everybody's hearts and minds yet in our company. We have a lot of support and a lot of, from crop consultants on the ground up through executive leadership, that are really excited about this and see the different opportunities, whether it's for our growers, whether it's in the marketplace, whether it's for just reporting on the good that we can do with the growers we're working on. But there's still a lot of, we are an ag retail business, we are a fertilizer manufacturer, our business is to sell and manufacture fertilizer. And so we still have a lot of discussions internally about how do we balance these things. We sit in a slightly different place than most other ag retailers, not fertilizer manufacturers, there are other publicly traded fertilizer manufacturers, but we're the only publicly, I believe, the only publicly traded fertilizer or ag retailer on the ground. And so we have to sit in this awkward position that a lot of the other retailers don't need to be in yet, because they're not facing the investor relation questions, they're not facing some of the pressures we face on reporting, because we are a publicly traded company. And so it can make it very awkward in the field to have those discussions with crop consultants and our leadership on why are we doing this? The neighboring retail doesn't have to do this, and they're able to go out and sell X, Y, Z instead of paying attention to these things. And so it goes back to that, how do we talk about, if we're the leading voice catalyst for this practice implementation on the ground, that growers are going to want to work with us because you have the request from the downstreams, from the people buying their products to be able to report on and show progress. And so it's a very big shift in how you think about an ag retail business versus the traditional approaches of just working with growers and getting product on the ground. And so it's not that we're not getting product on the ground, and it's not that sales are not a driving force in our business. It's just a huge shift in how you have that conversation with a grower, or how our team has that conversation with a crop consultant. Our crop consultants are on the ground with some of their growers every day of the week, and holidays and Sundays and weekends included, trying to solve those problems. And so a lot of it they're doing, how do we translate that back into the language that we all use in a room like this versus the language that they use in the field with their grower, so that we're all speaking the same way, and it's not this big scary, why are you coming at me with regenerative ag now? I've been doing good work with my growers for a long time.
Yeah. So
let's go around the
yeah,
panel.
I was
I'll
thinking
give you guys a
next.
heads up.
yeah.
Always going clockwise.
So this February, I was actually in Saskatoon, and I'm going to answer your question, don't worry. And I was on a tour of the University of Saskatchewan with the RBC CEO, Dave Mackay. And he knows a scary amount of about soil. Like, I was concerned. I've sold fertilizers, and I was like, oh my God, how much does this guy know? So, I mean, from a very rudimentary basis, it has to start from the top down, right? But on a ground level, talking to farmers, I mean, these climate smart agricultural practices that we're trying to promote and help farmers get rewarded for, they essentially create more resilient farms. Mm-hmm. They hold water better. They promote biodiversity. So there's a financial case from the very get-go for these practices that we're trying to promote. But along with that, I mean, RBC, of course, we bank the entire agricultural supply chain. But for us, what we saw was, firstly, it's critical, to our economy. Agriculture hires 1 in 7 people from the labor force. It exports over $92 billion in food every year to over 200 countries, and that's critical to our balance of payments. But just from a personal side, I've had the honor of going across Canada this year, meeting urban and rural communities across the country, and agriculture is a uniting thread that brings our country together. We're a very big nation, and agriculture does a really effective job bringing everyone together. So I would say from a cultural identity standpoint, that would be another thing. But then lastly is about innovation. And if the agricultural sector isn't innovative, and they don't have access to the tools that are innovative, then Canada itself isn't going to be an innovative country. So maybe first off, I'll recap from top down, but also it's a good business case for the farm. But overall, RBC believes that if agriculture wins, if every sector of the Canadian economy wins, ultimately we as a business win as well. It's just very logical in that sense. So, yeah, I'll give it over to you, I guess.
I'm really, really lucky that our organization, I've got 3,000 colleagues around the world who are all driven about making a positive impact and driving sustainability. So no issues for our own organization to want to do something about this. Our biggest challenge is working with the companies, the corporates, to be able to find their catalyst. What is their driver to want to change? And I think it's been very difficult over the last 20 years to change companies from taking that everybody's full of aspirations and strategies. And you keep going, oh yeah, we're going to come up with this, I'm going to do this. But it's turning that into action. That's been one of the biggest barriers. So what is the catalyst for that? And for me, in the last 4 years, the biggest catalyst I've seen is the investment community have woken up. So prior to that, it was the government driving a lot, and it was a lot of us thinking that the consumers were demanding things, so we were changing and we were evolving to meet consumer expectations. But no, for me, the last 4 years, the biggest change has been the investment community coming in and saying, tell me what you're doing. I don't want to invest in a risky business. I don't want to invest in a business that isn't doing something in this area. So we've been very lucky to be able to work with the investment community to help them look at what do they need to look at? What does a good sustainable business need to do? And I agree with Mohamed, it's top down and it's kind of follow the money. If your investor is telling you you need to do something about it, your CEO is going to wake up and they're going to force it through the organization. So that's been the catalyst I've witnessed.
Ellery?
Yeah, really good stuff. So I spent a few years, well, in Department of National Defense is a big organization. I spent a few years at High Life and then at a smaller agricultural equipment company. And I didn't have a lot of success convincing some of those folks to do things differently. So I started my own company. So that's one thing that people could consider. I'm not saying everyone should do that. So my company is essentially a startup, I would say. There's a group of us. I have some co-inventors on our patents. So I can tell you a little bit of a story about that. To Julie's point about just solving the problem, I think it was Peter before saying, like, let's just solve the problems already. So I was in the livestock space. I brought this with me. And people probably say, well, what the heck is this thing? Well, one of the things we were seeing in the processing facilities was the variance, and I won't go down to too many of the details, but a variance in animal size. Well, why does that matter? Okay. Well, there's a huge labor challenge to get people into these processing facilities. So we had, and I was in charge of buying the equipment. I wasn't even doing engineering stuff proper. And so to get into context, there's about a 90-pound difference between hogs that are coming in from one batch to the next, like from one truckload to the next. So it's a huge challenge with robotics, as you can imagine. So well, why don't we figure out what's going on? Like, let's get to the bottom of what's happening here. You know, one of the ideas that's not new is livestock ear tags, right? Anybody that's been on a farm will say, yeah, that's just an ear tag. The problem with them is they're too expensive. So we were doing 2 million hogs a year, Maple Leaf probably 3 or something like that. So at $1.50 a piece, it starts to add up, not including the hardware to retrofit barns and get all this data together. So I just started thinking about it. I said, well, how do we do this? So this is a livestock ear tag. One piece dissolves in the hot water at the processing facility, and this piece didn't float before. We've made it so that it floats. Why do you want it to float? So you can recapture it, sanitize it, reuse it. So we can track an animal for 20 or 30 cents, collect the data off that. The data is what we really needed in the first place. This was just solving the problem of capturing that data. And we think that we can find $25 to $30 per animal. I haven't done the conversions on CO2 equivalents yet. I need to get on that. I'm running out of time. But in terms of, that's what producers understand, dollar per head. So that's where we're hoping the adoption comes. But it's better feed conversion rates. It's reduced emissions, feed costs, of course. And then on grain tracking, a co-inventor of mine, a friend of mine actually, Colin Rosengren, came to me and said, hey, you left your company now, do you want to help me with something? And he farms 10,000 acres in Saskatchewan, and he's a genius. I call him the mad scientist, respectfully. And what his concept was, and I can't go into the details too much yet because we're still patent pending, but essentially we're finding a way to, and we found a way actually to create a digital twin of grain, where it comes from in a field, specific coordinates. We can track that all the way to the bin. We're working with companies that have camera technologies to catch quality samples of at the time that the sample was collected, so they'll know exactly what quality of grain came from, not per square foot, but certainly per acre of the field. And then back to Sally's point, it's case, so what? So this grain shouldn't have been grown in this soil type, or the wrong fertilizer was applied. Next year we try something different. We can apply machine learning to do that. So you make incremental changes. Anybody who doesn't know what machine learning is, it's not that scary. You make incremental changes, and is it better or worse, basically, the next year. So you make small changes, so if it's worse, like, okay, we don't want to do that, you go back. And you can do models to keep that from taking too long. But I guess that's what I would encourage folks to do is just solve the problem and find the way to communicate that to others. I wasn't a big climate person. The way I connected with it was just to make things more efficient. I love to solve problems, make things more efficient, and be a good steward of the land. Growing up on the farm, you had to reuse everything, and you didn't want to pollute the land that you live on. So it was kind of born into me, but I never thought of it as a climate climate-based solutions. So a little bit different than some of these folks in the bigger organizations. I was wondering why I was here, and I thought I would share those stories that there's real problems out there that need to be solved. Go solve them, and then prove it to others what the value of it is, and I think there'll be some success. I think the bigger companies, it's hard to do that, right?
It is.
I can hand it over to you. It's very difficult internally to do these things.
It is.
Yeah.
It's hard to move that innovation up and down and across the business, and it's you have so many. It's such a mosaic between the growers, the crop consultants, and leadership in a large company to figure out exactly where you can make progress.
For sure. Great to have multiple perspectives. So we're going to press ahead. We have one last question. I'm going to start with Julie. Just before we go there, we do have some time at the end. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you're thinking of any questions, please write them down, and we'll run a mic over to you. So last question, we'll do a quick round, 1 minute each, in terms of making your own business case. So our audience is full of practitioners with an interest in making positive change, but maybe some of them report to bosses or stakeholders, partners or shareholders who still need some convincing. In the last few minutes, I'd like each of you to make a strong business case for why organizations should move quickly and with discipline to mitigate climate change.
Okay, I will keep it quick and keep it simple. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I had from a teacher many years ago. Keep it simple. So climate change is presenting risks, but also opportunities for many, many companies. So I think the investment case is simple. The business case is simple. Mitigate the risks, take advantage of the opportunities. And if companies don't do this, profitability, reputation, consumer expectations, and the ability to access funding is all going to be compromised. So who wants to invest in a company that isn't tackling this? Who wants to buy from a company that isn't tackling this? So if organizations don't address climate change issues, they're not going to be sustainable, and I don't even think they'll be in business in the future. Really simple, address your risks, take advantage of the opportunities.
Awesome. We'll go down the panel. Ellery?
My turn? We're going the other way now?
Well, we're going down the panel.
Yeah, I like what Julie said. I think for me, I gave this a lot of thought. I said, be courageous, I think, be humble, and especially, bigger groups, let's say Nutrien, RBC, Maple Leaf, not necessarily picking on you guys, but you guys have there's a lot of influence, a lot of power in those organizations. And I think what I would say is be open to innovation. So what I've experienced innovating is that you're almost trying to convince people to do things better. It's really frustrating to the point that some of our customers are in Europe. I haven't talked to a single customer in Canada on some of our technologies because I know how I'll be received, and it's too bad actually. It's too bad that anybody would have to experience that. So in your organizations, set a goal to test 10 new products a year, 10 new concepts a year. Let them fail, lose some money, whatever risk you're willing to take. It could be internal, it could be external. Some of your best ideas will come internal to your organizations. They know the problems, they know the challenges. They might be too scared to bring it up. They may not have a voice. So I would encourage groups to foster innovation that way. It's a fancy way of saying it. Just be willing to try new things, be willing to test out innovations. And I think that will, break through some of these, ag tech startups, allowing some of that technology and innovation to get into the larger corporations and then have a bigger impact faster.
I think we have to think at a systems level. One of the biggest challenges we run into as we think about what are the programs we're going to deploy and how we're going to interact is there's so much information out there that just wants one specific practice to be the answer. Well, we can't even have one practice a lot of the time be the answer on a single field. So you need to address the whole system and what's the profitability and the resource concern of the whole system. And for us, that's starting at the field level to figure out what is the right practice in the right place in that field to implement, to have more profit for the grower, to have more profit for our company, and to have a product that is going to meet the specs and requirements as we look downstream. So we do have to think about what fits in the right place and not just what is a popular practice that everybody wants to talk about and is the one that we should put out there because everybody talks about it a lot. It really has to be done at that field level and in some places at a subfield level to figure out how is this really going to work and benefit everybody up and down the supply chain.
Last word.
I'll keep it brief, but essentially, if we're able to successfully adopt these practices, we can grow more food with fewer emissions, ultimately. What we have to ensure is that we help producers get over this short-term risk, and there's no cookie-cutter solution. It's going to require multiple different solutions for every type of farm. So collaborating together across the supply chain is going to be as imperative as ever, and I'm glad to see that we're already doing that right now. So that's my final word, I guess.
Excellent. So I'm hearing don't get left behind, be courageous, be humble, be open to innovation, leverage your size and influence, have systems level thinking with multi-benefit frameworks, and collaborate. All right, so we'll have time for a couple of questions. Let us know who you're directing your question to, who on the panel or generally, and who would like to kick us off.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for your insights and all the knowledge that you've shared with us. One thing, I don't think I could leave here today without asking all of you, how come you didn't mention University of Guelph? Like, do you not see the, it's a genuine question. Do you not see the work that's going on or could be going on at the University of Guelph as part of the solution? From an innovation perspective, trying new things, taking advantage of opportunities. When you talk about soil, we work with soil, not just what to fertilize and when to fertilize, but how to rotate crops, whatever. In other words, I'm wondering if you think, and this is because as the university, I want us to understand how you think about us. And I think it's really important to get a sense of whether or not you see the work that we do, even through the Arrell Food Institute or Ontario Agricultural College. We are the food university, and you didn't mention us. So I'm kind of wondering, what are we missing?
I can.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ellery and Mohamed, I know you guys would have some great answers to
I'll
this.
start. I'll give Mohamed some time to think about it. So I'm here because of the University of Guelph. So through my research, I'm participating in the Net Zero Food Systems Challenge. So Gina, I don't know if she's in this room or not. Maybe I can tease her, but she's crazy enough to have invited me here. What I would say, so University of Guelph is amazing. Not only the food is amazing, but the research programs. And I would even add one thing I think researchers are doing well. I'm not sure if you guys have a program like this at Guelph, but it's called Lab to Market. I think it's a national level program now. And there seems to be a bit of a gap between researchers, very, very smart individuals. When I speak to the soil scientists in our group, I can't understand what they're saying because they're so smart. And I'm really interested in learning about soil. Being able to translate that into industry, into something that busy folks can pick up and say, okay, I can see how to apply this. And I think we need to do more applied, I'll call it applied research, but how do we take that innovation from the universities and be able to apply it in industry? I really think there in a lot of places I've seen a gap. So we're doing really fascinating research, but it's nice to have a part of that that's specific to solving challenges in industry. Sorry, go ahead, Mohamed.
Oh yeah, I mean, to answer your question, we already are working with the University of Guelph, especially the Arrell Food Institute. I mentioned earlier the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agri-Food. I know it's a really long name, and we have a lot of partners on it, but Maple Leaf Foods and Nutrien is also a part of this alliance as well. We're working with Asim Biswas, who is speaking in another room right now. Maybe he can testify as well. But essentially, we are already working with the University of Guelph on a lot of these different initiatives, and it's really important to work with your researchers, but also researchers across the country as well, as we already are with the University of Saskatchewan, for instance. So to answer your question, we already are working with the University of Guelph, and we intend to continue that work.
So you can be ambassadors.
Of course.
Oh, naturally.
We can be better ambassadors. Thank you for your question. That was
Mauricio,
great.
can I just add?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think I just to address the part of your question of what are we looking for from the universities, and at a North American scale and probably a global scale is we need more people. We don't have enough people going into agriculture that are really good on the ground and know all the stuff and have that communication skill to help a grower make the next best decision. We just don't have enough people. And there needs to be more communication on going into agriculture doesn't mean you're selling fertilizer or seed. It's the technology, it's the solving a problem, it's all of the things that having a career in agriculture are. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up working on farms, and my dad worked in ag retail, and somehow it just stuck. But we don't have enough people. We need more people in order to do all of the great things that everybody in this room wants to do. Without the resources for the growers on the ground, we aren't going to get there.
Excellent. I think there was a question back there, or, okay, go ahead. Whoever has the mic.
I have the mic.
You win.
Jean-Charles Levalet with ICA in Costa Rica. Two-part question. Given the current topic on carbon pricing in the country, what is the business case for carbon pricing for ag? Two quick examples. OECD, I think, was saying that 15-20% more mitigation could happen, greenhouse gas reductions, with carbon pricing than countries that don't. And then grazers on grasslands in Canada bring in another 12% carbon sequestration, GHG reductions out in the prairies. We need to compensate our farmers for this effort. So question on the business case for carbon pricing. And then I also work with all the ministers of agriculture, including Secretary Vilsack in the US. They make up our board of directors at ICA. And they're curious about carbon markets. They want to learn more. Any guidance there, please?
You want to go first,
No, I
Mohamed,
could go.
So yeah, we operate in that space. We have achieved verified Scope 1 offsets and recently sold them to RBC. Not a lot of tons, but we have gone through that process. It took 2.5 years to get to verified credits. Some of that is us, some of that is the farmer, some of that is the verification process. So it needs to, the whole system needs to function faster if we're going to meet some of these reporting needs. Pricing wise, we're working with partners like RBC and Maple Leaf to figure out what is that price point that they're comfortable with bringing back to the farmer. In our case, we bring whatever somebody's bringing us for a price goes 100% back to the grower. We're large, we're able to accommodate that infrastructure cost of running a carbon program. So we are able to bring 100% of that back to the grower. In Canada, we are loosely following that federal price, slightly below what the federal price is. In the US, we've done lots of due diligence to figure out what is the appetite for paying for those tons of carbon. Our current price in the US for growers that are signing up for our 2024 programs right now is $35 a ton for emission reductions achieved through nitrogen management. And in Canada, it is $50 a ton. So we try and keep the prices roughly the same, but we don't have, as we generate tons, we're finding more buyers to figure out what actually is going to work there for pricing. It's probably, when you look at just nitrogen management, that price point back to the grower per acre is probably enough to make that decision and make that practice cost flow, but it is not enough to get the grower excited to say, we're going to pay you somewhere between $2 and $7 an acre, because there's a lot of other ways, especially when you think about corn production in the US, to make $2 to $7 an acre than the data collection and all the effort that goes into participating in a carbon program that's going to get to a marketable credit.
I'll just add on to that. RBC's had a carbon trading desk since 2006, and from what I've heard so far, and I've been in the role for about 11 months now, always when I talk to the carbon trading desk, we have a lot of investors from around the world who are adamant and want to invest in Canadian agriculture, and especially carbon credits in agriculture. The issue that we're seeing right now is a lack of standardization. So what's the regulatory framework to protect an investment? So there's basically a dam. We have a lot of interest, but essentially what's stopping it right now is investors are fearful of putting money into the sector right now just because of a lack of standards, regulations, policies to protect their investment. Otherwise, we'll see what happened maybe with Vera earlier this year, where a lot of credits were shown to be greenwashing. So a lot of investors are fearful about that. But moving forward into the future, I mean, having a regulatory framework, clear policy, standardization, the credits themselves grow in value with the accuracy associated with that credit as well. So it's really important to consider that aspect as well. So the more accurate we can get, the more precise, the more valuable the credit will be, and the more we can pay farmers for what they're practicing on their farms right now. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, it's Jeff from the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. I mentioned this morning we're doing a conference in Singapore, Canada in Asia Agri-Food Conference. Coincidentally, in the same week, we're doing also a 2-day conference on climate solutions, and there's going to be a lot of overlap between those. I'm interested in, as we track foreign investment flows into Canada, out of Canada, and if there is really like a globally significant potential to achieve, lower emissions and to get carbon credits in the ag sector in Canada, is it possible this can actually make Canada a magnet for a certain kind of international investment based on advances that are being made in the sector in Canada? Is that something that you would see as bringing a net inflow of investment kind of related to those exchanges?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, where's my invitation? I want to come to Singapore. But secondly, again, I mean, the opportunity is there. If we can manage a way to sequester through climate smart agricultural practice, 35 to 38 megatons till 2050. That's 25% of Canada's national emissions. That's a lot of carbon credits for investors to plug into, and that's something they're really excited about. But again, it's just about that. How can we protect investments so that whenever they invest in programs, it's assured that whatever they've invested in, it will stick, essentially.
Can
ahead,
I just build? So that's the opportunity side for investors. Investors' primary purpose is to mitigate their risk. So investors will only come if they know that companies are looking at their risks, particularly around agriculture and the changing climate and the extreme events becoming less extreme and more common. So there's that side of the equation too, that it's not just about the upside, which is great, but it's the risk management, which is more fundamental to the running of the business. That's what the investors want to see managed.
I was just going to add, it's all about verification to me. I mean, Canada has monstrous land mass, forestry's proven to sequester grazing lands. There's lots of, we think this sequesters, and as soon as we can prove it, I'll say with a sensor, because I'm kind of wired that way, but somehow measure in a cost-effective, I'll say real time or in a reasonable amount of time basis, I think that investment, if I'm an investor, if you can prove it, right, mitigate your risk, you can see your, let's say there's a dashboard, we can see on our screen, you're buying credits, this soil has the ability has a capacity to sequester, X amount more carbon, and it's got to make it more tangible, right? And then I think that will happen. Whereas right now, these folks know more about the carbon markets than me, but to me it seems kind of like, cryptocurrency, or something like that, where it's just difficult for people to wrap their head around. And if we can get a way to verify, I think it will allow some of this capital to flow and people to trust it. And then to Mohamed's point, I think having that framework that, we know policies and government standards and things aren't going to change a few years from now. So.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Mohamed, Julie, Ellery, Sally, thank you so much for your time and your perspectives today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM at the University of Guelph or via podcast on all major platforms. And thanks to the Arrell Food Institute for permission to broadcast this panel discussion. Please join us again next time for another episode of Food Farm Talk.